The First Ghost, a novel of God's Legion, by J.T. Dowdy. Chapter 2. One of you asked me a question during the last break, which I feel I should have explained at the beginning of our lecture today. He asked me why I was so against the Legion trading with other nations. I am not against trading luxury goods or finished products, and it would be hypocritical of me to say otherwise, since my favorite pen was made by a master craftsman from creator Izanagi's Kamikaze in the 7th dimension. I am against the reliance on other nations to produce everyday items, or anything related to the military, for what should be a self-evident reason. So, before we continue our lecture, I shall reiterate my stance that trade outside of the Legion should be for goods people want, not for goods people need. This is something some of the nations which join the Legion still struggle with today, but each and every one of them should be self-reliant if the system we have built is working as intended. Remember, we are a confederation of nations working together for a common goal. The balance is broken when everyone specializes in a particular product, since some products are worth far more than others. Excerpt from a trade conference on Mismar 4, given by the Legion Master. The Brahmanavata consulate was like all government buildings from their culture, a gaudy veneer of extravagance plastered on crumbling, poorly maintained buildings. Almost everything was covered in a sheathing of gold plate to show off the obvious wealth, and thus the station of those inside. Precious gems set into the surface of rare and expensive hardwoods would have been glittering in the sunlight of the Harlock star. But since it was night time, they sat matte, dull, and only sparkled when vehicular lights played over them. Tila and Amaranthine had no issues spoofing the electronic surveillance systems thanks to the implanted equipment of the Ghost, and dodging the parade ground soldiers was a comical affair. The soldiers were dressed to the nines with foppish clothing that made far too much noise for them to be stealthy. Never mind, they all marched with steel-shod boots, which clattered louder than a battalion on the concrete walkways. The hobnails were because Creator Vishnu and his siblings in their nation were miserly in the extreme and would only furnish soldiers with one pair of boots a year. The soldiers, being ever practical, did whatever they could to extend the life of their meager and oftentimes irreplaceable equipment. Pulling themselves up and over a second-story railing, the two women slipped inside after disabling an electronic lock and camera systems. Deciding in advance of the operation, the women headed deeper into the complex and up several floors to get to the Brahmanavata ambassador's apartment. A set of carved double doors, trimmed in yet more glittering gold, awaited them next to a semi-lifelike statue of Creator Vishnu. Someone needed to repaint the statue, as the blue paint to represent the Creator's skin tone had faded to a sallow grey color. Amaranthine's implants informed her there was no electronic locks on the door. The woman grabbed one of the ornate handles and pressed her gloved thumb against the door lock, only to find it immobile. "Crap," Amaranthine whispered to her partner, her heart rate spiking at the setback. "It's a physical lock. Who even uses those anymore?" "Paranoid people," Tila replied, looking back down the hallway to follow the muzzle of her machine pistol set to fire subsonic munitions. "Can you pick it?" "I don't have any picks with me, because no one uses tech this old anymore." "Switch places," Tila whispered, moving to the door. She pressed the tip of her pointer finger to the keyhole, and her unnatural flesh flowed into the lock. A few minutes of working the complex tumbler system saw the thumb handle depress, and the two women were inside with no one the wiser. Amaranthine gently closed the door, holding down the latch with her thumb to keep it from making a metallic sound which would alert anyone paying attention. The inside of the ambassador's apartment was lavishly decorated with many statues and paintings from the motherland, plus very expensive objects from all of the major and minor powers in this three-dimensional universe. The center of the collection was an object suspended in a suspensor field. It was some fractal-looking device from a higher dimension which served an unknown purpose. Amaranthine looked away from the eye-watering device so as to not get sucked into staring at it. Tila gently tapped her right shoulder to point to a hallway leading off to her right, her arm highlighted in cyan wire mesh of the ghost's augmented vision, since they were both under full optical camouflage. The ambassador's bedroom was down that hallway. The ghost took only a moment to scan the atrium with low-powered acoustic waves, which let her see through the walls as if using an X-ray scanner. She nodded it was clear, and the two women moved on slowly and carefully to not make noise. The closer the two women got to the bedroom, the more sound they heard. There were many young women's voices coming from the room, and the sound of a whip of some kind. Poking a nanofiber camera underneath the door, Amaranthine relayed the video footage to Tila via a micro-laser that was nearly impossible to hack unless a person was standing directly in the beam with a receiver. The ambassador was the balding fat man tied to the bed. He was blindfolded with a gag in his mouth, while very young girls performed various sexual acts on him. "Legate Smythe, this is Tila." The succubus growled into her quantum communicator. "Are your boys free?" Amaranthine was on the same comms network, and heard the sleepy reply of a man barely holding on to consciousness with the aid of caffeine. "Gods above, old girl, it's 3 in the morning. Can this not wait till I go off shift? I am personally looking at the Brahmanavata ambassador engaging in underage sexual activities with children in the consulate. I need your boys here now." The legate in charge of capital security sounded more alert, but barely. "Tila, while I would love to kick in the doors and charge in to help, I am in the middle of a homicide investigation right now." The succubus's gloved hand, holding her machine pistol, made noise as her grip tightened in barely controlled fury. "Get your butt in gear and get over here." "Calm down. Who hasn't had sex before they were of age these days? I must remind you that is considered their territory. The Brahmanavata culture does not have any laws regarding ages of consent." There was a pause as the legate was talking to someone else in the background. "I am sorry, but legally I cannot kick in the doors since there has been no official crime." The voice of a woman Amaranthine had never heard before broke into the supposedly secure quantum communication. Only one guess was needed as to who this woman was. The ever-nosy sentient whom Amaranthine had questioned earlier about loyalty. "The charges are as follows, Smythe. Underage sexual acts with 2 Legion citizens, underage sexual acts with 3 illegals, money laundering, extortion, murder, blah blah. He is also harboring one of Minwalla's mirrors. I am sure we will find more, and I will keep digging. The Master and I will handle the fallout from this. Give 'em the boots medium style." "Well then, that's different," the police legate replied, now fully awake and clearly glad to pass off his current investigation to a subordinate. "Let me get my steel caps on. Give me 10 to warm up the birds and load them with a can of whoop-ass." "Guess we find a spot to wait," Amaranthine muttered. "No," Tila growled, dropping her optical camo and eyeing the door as if judging how hard she needed to kick it. Apparently, she had no love for people who messed with children. Amaranthine had wondered if the part about her childhood being passed over by the pirates had been false. Now she suspected it had not been. The succubus was taking the acts of the ambassador personally. Children screamed as the red-haired woman kicked in the door and entered like the harbinger of justice. The ghost swore as she drew her handgun and knife to guard the door from the guards, which would surely be coming soon. Tila was fast, faster than anyone the children had ever seen, as she quickly rounded them all up and secured them with whatever she had at hand, while the ambassador shouted for his guards into the gag, which forced his words out in an unintelligible shriek. He jerked his head around wildly as he tried to see through the blindfold, but whoever had tied it around his head had done a good job. Soon, Amaranthine's handgun was letting loose with subsonic slugs as guards came spilling through the door to the main hallway as they responded to the commotion. As it turned out, Legate Smythe only needed 5 minutes to get his gremlin gunships in the air over the embassy compound, and they were illuminating the grounds and immediate area with powerful spotlights to the point it looked as if the sun was out. Armored legionnaires wearing the black and red of policemen dropped to the ground to engage in brief but short gunfights before rounding up those with enough sense to toss their weapons away. The legate never made it to the ambassador's bedroom, since 2 other people had beaten him to the punch. The Legion Master and his second-in-command came stepping around the bodies Amaranthine had dropped. How they just happened to be in the correct area with a few trusted soldiers, the ghost could only guess. "Tila," Abaddon ordered, "help me get the children out of here. There is a gunship waiting to take them." He looked at the fat man still bound on the bed. "Away from here." Lucifer gestured to the ghost to stay with him, as Tila and the huge angel began filing the scared kids out to legionnaires holding blankets to wrap around them. Once alone, Lucifer walked closer to loom over the bed from his immense height. "Well now," he said, "what am I going to do with you, Ambassador Mahavir?" The blindfolded man had regained some of his composure as he spoke in the tone of a lawyer stating facts, since the gag had been removed. "You have illegally invaded sovereign Brahmanavata territory, killed Brahmanavata soldiers, illegally detained me, and stolen my property. Unless you release me immediately, there will be war for this." The Legion Master seemed unconcerned as he drew his wide-bladed falchion. "See, Sanju," he argued while testing the edge of his sword with his thumb, "I would care about all of that if Vishnu could actually do something to back up your very technically legal argument. I would have even looked the other way if you hadn't been laying with children." They were all over 7. This is true, and that would matter if you were on one of your people's worlds. However, unfortunately for you, mortal, you are on mine. The fat man began to quake in fear as the realization of the situation became crystal clear. "We do have laws on my worlds governing morality and good conduct, yet I would be willing to let you go with a thorough flogging if you tell me where the mirror is you have been using to sneak spies here, and just who the spy master is who kept talking to you during those tedious trade negotiations we have been sitting through." The ambassador had pressed his lips into a tight line to remain mute. "Come now, Sanju. Surely your life is worth such insignificant details." Sanju Mahavir was no fool, and he did value his life. The mirror is in the other room. It is standing up against the wall with a white sheet draped over it. "Verify that, please, Amaranthine. That's one of the requirements for your life down. And what of the other?" "Here..." The ambassador trailed off in obvious terror of whatever organization the individual belonged to. "Mortal, are you afraid of that man?" "Yes," the ambassador sputtered. The flat of the Creator's sword landed ever so softly against the mortal's inner thigh, the edge a hair's breadth away from his manhood. "Fear is understandable, Sanju. I even respect it, as it means you are intelligent enough to imagine all sorts of unfortunate things which can befall you. However, while the Garthamal coalition may be powerful, they are not here with you presently. I am. And I really don't care for you that much. If you already know, then why are you asking me? The blade moved to bite into flesh as the mortal bit back a scream. Answer the question. Okay. The Brahmanavata ambassador agreed, his voice high-pitched and squeaky. The name he gave me was Mr. August. My people checked it out and told me it was obviously a fake moniker. He works for the Garthmal Coalition and was the orchestrator of a conspiracy to put other agents on your capital. They paid me $1.5 billion rupees for my help. That's all I know, I swear it. He never told me any plans. Just what I was supposed to do for the coalition. The blade withdrew to cut the silken ropes holding the mortal's hands to the bed frame. I believe you, but let me make 2 things clear for you. I have a recording of your confession, which will be broadcasted if you ever do such a thing again. And if you ever so much as even think about touching a person under the age of 17 Legion Standard years ever again in my creation, I will come find you. The ancient being leaned closer to hover his face right above the trembling mortal. His eyes were glowing with their own silver light, so bright they shone through the blindfold the ambassador was wearing. And when I find you, Sanju, you will wish the coalition had. Am I clear? The mortal ripped the blindfold off of his face while clutching his bleeding scrotum. Perfectly clear. Holy One. Excellent. I will be expecting you in the morning to continue the talks in my government's favor. Oh, and one more thing. Did this Mr. August meet you here, or somewhere else? An apartment on 8th Street by that big swimming pool. We only ever met in the early morning when people were asleep. Is that the Mule House Apartments? The ambassador nodded his head and said, Yes. Room number 312. The creator sheathed his sword in a too-fast-to-follow motion before turning to go to the back room where the mirror was. Amaranthine had pulled the sheet off to verify it was in fact what she was looking for, only to frown as she realized she had no clue how to tell if such an object was authentic. Is this what you were looking for? She asked the tall creator. The ancient being held out a hand to touch the reflective face of the mirror, which then rippled like someone dropping a stone into a calm lake. Its border was made of curved, dark, stained hardwood with minimal ornamentation. Oh yeah, he said, that's a real one. He paused to touch the silver pendant, housing his quantum communicator, which was underneath his jacket. Amen. Meet me at the Brahmanavata consulate, with what men you can scrounge up on short notice. We need to see where a mirror leads. At this hour, came a gruff male voice. Never mind. Do you care if they're active duty or not? Anyone who wants to shoot something and are willing to go through one of Minwala's mirrors to see what's on the other side will work. There was a pause on the line, followed by, Got a whole room full of dudes for you. We're on our way. Cool, tell them I owe them dinner and beer. Lucifer finished, then looked back to the ghost. Go get Tila, and tell her you will both need to find a Mr. August, that's the spy master, at the Mule House Apartments, room 312. Expect trouble. On it, Amaranthine said, moving to leave the room and find her partner. She paused at the door and asked, Do we need to go heavy? She meant combat armor and main-line weapons. No, just watch the front door. As the ghost was leaving the room, she heard the ambassador cry out as he received the beating of a lifetime so he would remember to never touch children ever again.